Why is my body settling this easily? Why do I notice quiet everywhere? Why does my breath slow all by itself? Why does calm feel so familiar in my system? Why do I feel so free? Why does my body trust this moment fully? Why does stillness feel so normal now? Why am I so comfortable doing nothing? Why does my nervous system soften and relax so quickly? Why feels quiet totally safe in my body? Why does stillness stay even when thoughts pass? Why does my attention rest so easily? Why feels the center of my body so steady? Why does stillness deepen more and more? Why is stillness my well of wisdom and truth? Why do I feel divinely supported? Why does my body know naturally how to pause? Why does silence feel so kind and gentle? Why is this moment spacious and perfect? Why is stillness so precious to me? Why does stillness feel wide and open? Why is stillness my sacred space? Why is my presence so settled? Why does stillness feel so harmonious and clear? Why am I replenishing and grounding when I am still? Why is stillness my ultimate life force? Why do I feel so stable and at ease? Why does rest feel the best thing to do? Why is stillness such a rich and free experience? Why feels stillness like my pure essence? Why is stillness my natural sanctuary? Why do I love this magical emptiness so much? Why does this moment feel enough? Why feel stillness like home, this holy place within? Why does it feel so natural that my existence is enough? Why does the ground always support me? Why don't I have to earn my right to exist and can just relax? Why does it feel safe to simply be? Why is my presence already a contribution? Why do I soften when I allow myself to be exactly as I am? Why am I already held even when I do nothing at all? Why does my body recognize this quiet truth so easily? Why is the space within me already full, complete, and alive? Why does it feel like coming home when I let myself be carried? Why is life moving through me naturally and with ease? Why do I just belong here? Why is my existence enough? Why does being me feel so peaceful, familiar, and true? Why is my body learning to trust more and more each day? Why does relief spread through me when I stop trying? How is it that nothing is missing in this moment? Why does my system unwind so naturally when I allow just to be? How is my presence already complete? Why does it feel safe to let go? How is simplicity becoming totally natural to me? Why does my breath deepen just by being present? Why is being here already a full and meaningful experience? Why does everything soften when nothing is being asked to change? Why is presence already whole without needing to become anything else? Why is simplicity revealing itself as a natural state? Why do I feel so calm in my body right now? Why does stillness feel so natural to me? Why do I feel so connected and at peace within? Why does my body feel so full of love? Why do I feel so balanced and grounded? Why do I feel so clear and gentle? Why do I trust my inner world so fully? Why does life work out so perfectly? Why do I feel so supported by the flow of life? Why do I feel so aligned with where I am right now? Why does inspiration arrive exactly when I need it? Why is creating this joyful and precious process? Why does kindness fill my days so easily? Why do I feel so connected to everything around me? Why does love feel like the most natural state? Why do I feel so calm and radiant? Why is everything flowing with such ease? Why do I feel so alive and divinely connected? Why does joy arrive in everything I do? Why do I notice abundance everywhere I look? Why does my body feel so safe and relaxed? Why does rest feel so replenishing for me? Why do I feel so at home in my body? Why does warmth spread so naturally through me? Why does my belly feel so centered and in peace? Why does life move me in such kind ways? Why does letting go feel so natural? Why does the flow always catch me? Why do I feel so richly supported by life? Why does everything I love arrive so gently and comforting? Why does kindness meet me everywhere? Why do I feel so deeply treasured by life? Why does my presence feel like the most wonderful gift? Why does life feel so whole and complete? Why does everything feel in precious balance and harmony? Why do I move so naturally with the rhythm of life? Why is alignment so easy and natural? Why does life respond so smoothly to my presence? Why do I feel so centered and powerful from within? Why do I feel so deeply aligned with Source? Why does my energy stay so steady and clear? Why does my body feel so safe and relaxed? Why does warmth spread so gently through me? Why does my nervous system soften so easily? Why do I feel so held from within? Why does my belly feel like a safe home? Why do my muscles let go so naturally? Why does stillness feel so reassuring in my body? Why does my body welcome rest so fully? Why do I feel so gently protected? Why do I feel so comfortable with my pace? Why does my intuition guide me so clearly? Why do I feel so quietly confident? Why does my body feel so relieved right now? Why does everything inside me soften so naturally? Why does my nervous system unwind totally? Why does rest arrive all by itself? Why do my shoulders drop so deliciously? Why does relief move through me like warm water? Why do I feel so light and grounded? Why does my whole being sink into ease? Why do I trust letting go so completely? Why does rest feel like home? Why do I feel so at ease with this moment? My breath so soft and supportive. Why do I feel so deeply at home within myself? Why does my body feel so relaxed and alive today? Why does my energy flow so smoothly through me? Why do I feel so supported by life? Why does joy arise so naturally within me? Why do things fall into place with such ease? Why is it so easy to trust perfect unfoldings? Why do opportunities come to me with such ease? Why do I feel so abundant and blessed? Why do I feel so free in expressing myself? Why do my relations feel so warm and genuine? Why do I feel so loved and loving? Why does stillness hold me so gently? Why do I feel so supported in doing and in being lazy? Why does my breath know exactly what to do? Why does my nervous system relax so easily? Why does my body respond so freely and light? Why does everything unfold so magically? Why do I trust universal timing fully? Why does abundance feel so calm and normal? Why do opportunities find me with such ease? Why does receiving feel so safe now? Why do I feel so held by love itself? Why do connections feel so warm and rich? Why do I feel so complete? Why do I rest so naturally in who I am? Why does being feel so deeply satisfying? Why are my inner and outer world so synchronized? Why do I always sense the next logical step? Why does clarity arise so quietly? Why does everything settle into harmony so easily? Why does equilibrium feel like my natural state? Why do I feel so aligned with the whole? Why does my presence restore balance automatically? Why does my breath feel like a gentle companion? Why does my body trust this moment completely? Why do I feel so grounded? Why does safety feel so natural and familiar to me? Why does my body feel like a friend? Why do I trust myself so deeply? Why do I feel so calm about where I am? Why does my path feel so true? Why do I feel so free to let go? Why does tension melt completely? Why does my breath feel like a gentle release? Why does my body know exactly how to release? Why does letting go feel so safe now? Why does my body welcome this pause so fully? Why does stillness feel like a soft landing? Why does release feel so good? Why do I feel so comfortable not knowing right now? Why does uncertainty feel so light and playful for me? Why do I trust what hasn't revealed itself yet? Why does life enjoy dancing with me? Why do things unfold in ways I couldn't have imagined? Why does not having a plan feel so free? Why do answers always arrive when I stop looking? Why does mystery feel like an invitation? Why do I feel so safe inside the unknown? Why does life show me things I didn't know I wanted? Why does curiosity guide me so gently? Why do I feel so relaxed about not knowing? Why does the unknown feel so friendly to me? Why do I trust what hasn't arrived yet? Why does life surprise me in such gentle ways? Why do I feel so open to what wants to emerge? Why does uncertainty feel like freedom? Why do unexpected turns suit me so well? Why do I enjoy letting things unfold naturally? Why does mystery feel nourishing to me? Why do answers come when I stop asking? Why do I feel so safe without a plan? Why does life love revealing itself to me? Why do I trust timing I cannot see? Why does curiosity guide me so perfectly? Why does the future feel light and open? Why do I welcome what I didn't anticipate? Why does not knowing feel so alive? Why do I feel supported even without clarity? Why does life feel playful with me right now? Why does this feel so right? Why is there so much space here? Why does everything feel quietly aligned? Why does this moment feel complete? Why do I feel so settled all of a sudden? Why does ease arise so naturally? Why does everything seem to rest? Why does this feel so simple? Why is there nothing to adjust? Why does my body soften right now? Why does life feel close? Why does this feel gently familiar? Why is there so much calm underneath? Why does everything breathe together? Why does this feel deeply okay? Why does presence feel so obvious? Why does this moment welcome me so enthusiastically? Why does everything seem to agree? Why does stillness feel so alive? Why do I feel so quietly content? Why does life feel full of possibilities right now? Why do options appear so naturally? Why do I feel so blessed now life works for and with me? Why does having infinite possibilities feel totally normal to me? Why do new paths reveal themselves so easily? Why does choice feel light and playful? Why is life so spacious and exciting all the time? Why does everything seem possible? Why is my reality feeling so flexible and open? Why is life so generous and surprising to me? Why is exploring so much fun? Why are my days such big and wonderful adventures? Why do all these choices feel rich and exciting? Why does everything feel possible now that life is such a cooperative component? Why am I expanding through all these new possibilities? Why do possibilities surround me so joyfully? Why does life keep offering more options to explore and have fun with? Why does life feel so responsive when I soften? Why do new paths open as I stay relaxed and open? Why does possibility feel so familiar and natural? Why does my system fully trust that things work out? Why is life so kind to me? Why am I so satisfied every day? Why is it that things work out so magically for me? Why is every moment so full of wonder? Why am I so connected and present? Why am I so one with my body? Why is my body guiding me always to the best experience? Why do I feel so elated by the incredible ideas I get? Why is expansion so normal to me and so delicious? Why is life so still and so vibrant at the same time? Why can I enjoy everything so intensely lately? Why do I feel so full of life and rich? Why am I full of inspiration and creation? Why do I feel so fulfilled and content? Why do I feel so blessed and alive? Why is my life so complete now that I am fully present and grounded in my body? Why do I feel so arrived and whole? Why is life so rich? Now I know that things always fall into place for me.